The clerk of court, having already read all the matters that need to be taken up this morning, we'll just simply proceed with the resumption of the interpellations, and we will have Justice Leonen resume his questioning. Justice Pepe, you have already finished, right? Okay, so Justice Leonen.
May I ask the Solicitor General, please?
Good afternoon.
I hope you had care of.
So.
Okay. You mentioned a while ago the basis of the power of the President was residual power. Did I get you correctly?
One of the three powers, Your Honor.
Yeah. Just to recall, the President is Chief Executive, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
He is also Commander-in-Chief, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And he is Head of State.
Yes.
Yes, and these three powers are clearly enumerated in the Constitution. For
Yes, Your
example,
Honor.
as Chief Executive, he has, as you said a while ago, he has control and supervision over the all bureaus and departments under the office of under the Executive.
Correct, Your
In
Honor.
fact, he is the Executive as far as we are concerned.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, and as Commander-in-Chief, he has the powers under Section 18 of Article 7, recently invoked in the proclamation on national emergency. Isn't that correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Yes, and as Head of State, he is now acting as Head of State in the ASEAN, representing our country in Laos. Am I?
You're not mistaken,
Okay,
Your Honor.
thank you. Concept of residual power, if we trace it to its origin, it was not only San Lakas, as you mentioned, but probably the origin of this was a case decided in the 1960s entitled Gonzales versus Executive Secretary. Just to refresh you, I think that case was about a donation that was about to be made to the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Do you recall this case in constitutional law?
I have a faint recollection of it, Your Honor.
Yes, and the question then was whether the First Lady at that time, Imelda Marcos, as head of the CCP, could accept a donation given to the CCP, notwithstanding the fact that there was no law. Can you recall this case already? And the court there said that because it was not lodged in any of the other departments, the physical capability to be able to accept a donation cannot be done by Congress, neither can it be done by the Supreme Court. Therefore, loosely, the Supreme Court said that there is this residual power that should be granted to the President, and he can delegate it to the First Lady at that time. Am I correct in the recollection of this case?
I trust your recollection,
Yes,
Your Honor.
probably I am. And therefore, the concept there was a contingent power, a power that must be exercised at present because nobody else can exercise it. Is that not correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. And in Gonzales, in Marcos versus Manglapus, this was penned by former Dean Irene Cortez of the UP College of Law, who became a justice of this court. It was, the main question was whether there was the power to bar the entry of the body of the late President Marcos then. Is this not correct? I'm sure that you've read Marcos versus Manglapus because it's cited copiously in your consolidated comment.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, in fact, you even cited it, the concept of a residual power from Marcos versus Manglapus during your oral presentation. Am I not correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Yes. And therefore, in that particular case, the question there had something to do with national security. Insofar as the court was concerned, it was a pro hac vice case, and it allowed the President to make a determination based on the concept of national security. Am I not mistaken?
I think you're not, Your Honor.
Okay, then therefore, it had something to do with something at present which should be addressed. So a contingency at present that should be addressed. That's national security, which the President had to deal with. Same with San Lakas. San Lakas was also dealing with a contingency. Now, there is a law that states that there is an entity of the government that can settle historical controversies. Would you recall if there is such a law?
At the moment, I cannot recall it yet.
It's
Your Honor.
the law creating the National Historical Commission, where one of its powers, of course, that was also part of the issues argued here before your term, in the case of Torre de Manila. So clearly, there is a law that says that the National Historical Commission is the final arbiter of our history. And therefore, in terms of setting the policies of government, it is the legislature that takes that into consideration. So between the executive and the legislature, it's the legislature that settles policy. Is that not correct? The executive executes.
Yes, Your Honor.
And therefore, the oath of the President in Article 7 is to faithfully execute the laws,
Yes, Your Honor.
comply, and obey the Constitution. It does not create policy, and policy is only subordinate kind of policy, which is how to implement a particular law. To set policy, when there is no contingency, would you agree with me that this is the power of Congress?
To set policy, yes, Your Honor.
When there is no contingency. So, now in this particular case that we have here, and the situation is that we have a libingan ng mga bayani. Okay, and the situation is that we are contributing to a historical narrative. Situation also is a determination of which presidents may be where presidents may be interred to give them recognition. But there is no such law. There is only an executive, there is at best a proclamation converting the name Republic Memorial Cemetery to Libingan ng mga Bayani. There is no law. So would you say that there is a gap here which should be addressed not by the President but by Congress?
Actually, Your Honor, we cited two laws as basis for this libingan ng mga bayani, Your Honor. Can I refer to my notes, Your Honor?
Yes, you mentioned the executive order, the administrative code, section 14.
Yes, Your Honor.
And the other one is, I think you don't agree that, you said that you don't agree that Republic Act 289 is applicable in this case.
Republic Act 289 does not apply with
Okay.
respect to libingan ng mga bayani, Your Honor.
Yes, may I move from there first before I go to the executive order? You said that Republic Act 289 is, in your words, defunct.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Is there such thing as a defunct law, or should laws be repealed? And insofar as laws are not repealed, they stand.
Well, Your Honor, I agree with the observation of Justice Velasco that it is, in effect, a dead law, Your Honor.
Yes. Is there such thing? Is there a legal concept such as a dead law? Aren't all laws, all statutes passed by Congress, signed by the President? And therefore, to destroy or to abrogate a law, there needs to be another law that repeals it. In other words, is there such thing as a law that becomes defunct simply because the President does not implement it?
Your Honor, the inaction of Congress for more than 67 years, they did not even fund it, not a single red cent, Your Honor. And the fact that the supposed land on which the national pantheon should be erected is no longer existent, Your Honor.
Because there was a proclamation by the President creating
Yes.
the libingan ng mga bayani. Is that not correct? So can the President by himself render a law dead or defunct?
Well, it doesn't have to take a precedent to find out that a law is dead. It has been dead, actually, or defunct for the last 67
Are you
years,
familiar
Your
with
Honor.
family courts?
Yes, Your Honor.
You know how long it took for this court to lobby Congress in order that it gets funded?
I'm not aware of that,
But
Your
then
Honor.
we still have family courts. It did not become defunct. In fact, this court, knowing that it is still law, designated several branches to act as family court. Is that not correct? In other words,
I have no personal knowledge
even
of that,
if
Your
a
Honor.
law is not funded, it remains as a law, unless there is another law that repeals it.
But
Unless you have a different theory.
even if, assuming, Your Honor, even if it's not dead, the origins of libingan ng bayani does not trace as a source Republic Act 289.
So your
We
position
have a
is that
PowerPoint
289
presentation, Your
is not the basis for the proclamation creating the libingan ng mga bayani.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so the basis for the libingan ng mga bayani, the creation of the libingan ng mga bayani is therefore what law?
As we cited, Your Honor, it's Presidential Decree 1076 and EO 292.
1076 shifted the supervision of national shrines, correct? From the council, which was civilian in nature, to the now PVAO.
Your Honor, may I be allowed, for clarity's sake, that that I can avail of the PowerPoint presentation, which delineates
Now my question is simple.
the origin of
The basis of the power of the libingan ng mga bayani, is it the executive order which contained the administrative code, precisely section 14 as you cited in your pleading? Because there is only one provision that you cited from the administrative code. And the other one, as you are saying, is Presidential Decree 1076. My reading of it is that it simply changed the supervision of national shrines from that of the civilian board and gave it to the PVAO for military ceremonies. Am I correct?
But apart from that law, Your Honor, and the Executive Order 292, there were series of AFP regulations which take their root
No,
from...
I'm sorry, Counsel. I'm looking at the statutory basis. And first, let's agree. The AFP regulations is not statute, right?
Come
It is
again,
not
Your
law.
Honor. I'm sorry.
The AFP regulation is not law. It is not a Republic Act. It is not a presidential decree. It is an administrative regulation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. In fact, as an administrative regulation, it is not an issuance from the President. It is an issuance from the AFP. That's why its nomenclature is AFP, correct?
Well, by order of the
Issued by the
higher
Chief of
authority,
Staff.
Your Honor.
Yes. So, we are looking at the basis for the proclamation, the statutory basis for the proclamation creating libingan ng mga bayani. So that's precisely only my question for now. What is the statutory basis for the President then to convert the Republic Memorial Cemetery to the libingan ng mga bayani?
Well, his power under the Administrative Code, Your Honor.
Yes, and if you read that power, which part of that provision in Section 14?
I don't have the Administrative Code before me, Your Honor. I cannot recite.
Perhaps you should. Perhaps you should have the code with you because this is oral
Well,
arguments before the court.
If you will allow me, Your Honor,
Yes,
I will...
you are allowed to get assistance from your counsels, and I think that was part of the briefing during the preliminary conference.
Yes,
that you
Your
are
Honor.
always allowed to get assistance from your... It's in your pleading, by the way. Section 14 is in your pleading.
excuse me, Your Honor.
Yes.
I have here an excerpt, Your Honor. Section 14. The power to reserve lands of the public and private domain of the government. The President shall have the power to reserve for settlement or public use and for specific public purposes any of the lands of the public domain, the use of which is not otherwise directed by law.
So there are two things there, public use and public purpose.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Is the creation of a libingan ng mga bayani falling under that power of the President, that statutory power, for public use?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can any member of the public use the libingan?
Not any member, Your Honor. It should be within the guidelines of the AFP regulations.
So is it still public use?
It will be public use, Your Honor, depending on the observance of the classifications, which allow certain persons to be interred at the libingan, Your Honor.
If it is not public, if only a few individuals, select individuals, can use the libingan, therefore, it is not public use.
Maybe it can be public use, but for a limited and classified persons only, Your Honor.
Is that the concept of public use? Is it your submission that that is the concept for public use?
Because the cemetery can only accommodate so much, Your Honor. Cannot accommodate the entire public in the
Okay.
Republic of the Philippines, Your Honor.
We'll go to that later. In fact, you cited the case in your consolidated comment, Chinese cemetery, I think, versus City of Manila, where you said that it does not need to have the character of everybody using it to be public use, correct? And therefore, the
If
key
there is a
therefore...
public purpose for it, yes, Your Honor.
Yes, so the key there is public purpose.
Yes, Your Honor.
What is the public purpose for the burial of Marcos?
It is to enforce the policy of of President Duterte for the national healing and reconciliation, and also as a fulfillment of his campaign promise, which he is now implementing, Your Honor.
And there is no statutory basis for your for that goal. You are saying your submission is that is part of the discretion, the political power of the president as of the moment.
Under his residual powers of the Constitution and
Okay.
other laws,
Let's go
Your
to
Honor.
the AFP circular, and may I ask your assistants to prepare a copy of the AFP circulars. There is a listing there of people that may be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani.
If we can activate the monitor here, I can present the PowerPoint presentation.
The listing says, letter A, people with Medal of Valor, correct? Letter B is President
Yes.
or Commander-in-Chief, correct?
Medal of Valor awardee, Presidents or Commander-in-Chief, AFP, Secretaries of National Defense, Chiefs of Staff, AFP, Generals slash flag officers of the AFP, government dignitaries, statesmen, national artists, and other deceased persons whose interment or reinterment has been approved by the Commander-in-Chief, Congress, or the Secretary of National Defense. And may I add also, Your Honor, that 3 Chief Justices have been interred.
We are
at
just
Libingan,
looking
Your
at
Honor.
the text of the law. I understand that there are 3 Chief Justices. Can you
Yes,
go
sir.
on to letter J?
Former Presidents, Secretaries of Defense, Chief of Staff, AFP, Generals, Flag Officers, Secretaries of National Defense, and Chief of Staff are authorized to be interred at the LNMB.
I think this is not the updated one because in the copies that you have given us, there is proviso for the widows of the Secretary of National Defense and the widows of the Chief of Staff. Can I ask the PVAO to confirm whether, I think the widows of the presidents, widows of the Secretary of National Defense, and widow of the
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
yes.
I haven't seen the, this is an AFP matter, Your Honor. I would like to manifest my presence here as a representative of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office. And the issuance of the directive is a matter of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. If you will allow me to differentiate,
Perhaps later, but
yes, Your Honor.
I'm just pursuing a point, and after my point, perhaps just 1 or 2 more so that I can yield the floor
Yes,
to
Your
one
Honor.
of my colleagues. AFP circular, maybe the Solicitor General. Thank you very much.
yes, Your Honor.
The Solicitor General, please. AFP circular 161-374. Can you look at
Yes, Your Honor.
yes. So we are on the same page. Letter I.
Letter I is former presidents, secretaries of defense, chief of staff, AFP, generals, flag officers, dignitaries, statesmen, national artists, widows of former presidents, secretaries of national defense, and chief of staff are authorized to be interred at the Libingan, Your Honor.
Okay, let me just pursue some points about this AFP circular. Is the order of the listing of the persons that are authorized in the order of precedence in terms of honor? A, Medal of Valor awardees. B, Commanders-in-Chief. C, Secretaries of National Defense.
You're referring to
Is it in
161-374, Your
yes,
Honor?
is it in the order of precedence in terms of honor? In other words, Medal of Valor awardees certainly are recognized heroes. Commanders-in-Chiefs, well, were Commanders-in-Chiefs.
Presidents or Commander-in-Chiefs,
Yes.
Your Honor.
President is always the Commander-in-Chief. There has never been a time that it was separated, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. So is this in the order of precedence?
Well, this is a listing, Your Honor. It doesn't say precedence.
Yes. Because my question is, if the AFP allowed widows of a chief of staff to be buried in the Libingan, why does it not allow a widow of the Medal of Valor awardees? You agree with me, Counsel, that everything that government does is subject to the Constitution, specifically equal protection. Is this not correct? Everything that the government does is subject to the Constitution, including equal protection. There should be non-discrimination
As a
in
rule,
any
yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is an issuance that can be applied generally. It is not only for Marcos, right? It is for everybody who wants to be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani, correct? As a matter of fact, when a soldier dies, they can apply to be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani, and there is a process for determination whether they are qualified. Is that not correct?
I believe so, Your Honor, provided they are included in this list.
Yes. Now, the list itself, you think that this is not discriminatory? It is fair? Because
I
widows
cannot, I cannot pass judgment on this, Your Honor, because this is a regulation of the AFP, Your Honor.
But we are the court, and you are the Solicitor General, and I am asking you your legal opinion with respect to this matter. And this is oral arguments on this regulation, whose validity can be put in question because it is necessary for the analysis in order to come to a disposition of these particular issues. As far as we are concerned, you did say that this is the basis for the body of Ferdinand Marcos to be interred in the libingan ng mga bayani. You follow me,
Yes,
Counsel?
actually, Your Honor,
And if the AFP circular is null and void, then there is no basis except the President's discretion, unbounded discretion. Is that not correct?
the more recent regulation, Your Honor, is 161-375, Your Honor.
Okay, so was it already removed? Widows? It's still in letter J.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, so same question.
The question is...
The question is this AFP circular valid?
Yes, Your Honor.
Considering that it favors, by the way, the AFP circular is issued by the Armed Forces of the Philippines, correct?
May I first reason out why I think it's valid, Your Honor. The inclusion of widows.
Just follow this trend, and then I will allow you to explain in order for you to see the argument. Okay. The circular was issued by the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Is this not correct?
Yes, Your Honor, because this is
The Armed
in
Forces of the
reality a
Philippines-
military cemetery, Your
Yes.
Honor.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines, perhaps even under martial law, does not have jurisdiction over civilians. Is that not correct?
Under martial law, Your Honor?
No, no, no. The Armed Forces of the Philippines does not have jurisdiction over civilians. Yes or no?
As a rule, yes, Your Honor.
Yes. Even under martial law, the AFP does not have jurisdiction over civilians.
Well, we have to clarify what jurisdiction means, Your Honor, because
In other words, they cannot bind civilians.
in terms of administrative orders, Your Honor,
They cannot bind civilians. In terms of their orders, this is an order of the Chief of Staff. Can the Chief of Staff of the Army order the Solicitor General to do anything?
is, let me clarify, Your Honor, is this under martial law or
I
not?
think you have to answer the question. The question was, can the AFP Chief of Staff order a civilian?
In general, no, Your Honor, as a
No.
rule.
I'm a bit scared, counsel, because you're the Solicitor General and you hesitate to say that the AFP cannot order a civilian. In other words, in your mind, you're contemplating the possibility that the AFP can order a civilian under this dispensation?
I am just very cautious, Your
Okay.
Honor.
So this is an order from the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Is that not correct?
It is a classification, Your Honor.
Yes. And therefore, the AFP issued this order as a result of the President's power as Commander-in-Chief, correct?
And as Chief Executive, Your Honor, and President.
But this was issued by the Chief of Staff. It's not an executive order, correct?
Well, there is a chain of command, Your Honor. The Chief of Staff takes his bearings from the
Yes, but who issued this-
Secretary, and the
Who
Secretary
issued this order?
as alter ego, it's the President, actually.
Who issued this order? Was it signed by the President? Was it signed by President Marcos? President Macapagal?
This was issued on September 11, 2000, Your Honor.
Yes, issued by?
This is issued by order of the Secretary of National Defense.
If the libingan ng mga bayani is a military cemetery, why is it that there is national artist also included in the order?
Because they fall under the classification of probably dignitaries, Your Honor,
Why single out national artists?
because they have contributed something to society, Your Honor.
Maybe I will tell you, because there is a law that actually allows national artists to be interred in the libingan ng mga bayani. Is that not correct?
I believe you, Your Honor.
Yes. Is there a law that allows victims of martial law to be honored as heroes?
Yes, Your Honor.
But yet it is not in this AFP circular, correct?
Not yet, Your Honor.
Not yet. But if it, yes, not yet. Perhaps that is a better answer because then you can do something about it. But then the point is, why is there this listing and not any other listing? Why is there for example, why do widows of Medal of Valor awardees, why are they not entitled to be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani, whereas it is possible to bury the widow of a chief of staff?
Well, Your Honor, it's in the classification, and I cannot explain why
So is it
widows.
discriminatory?
Your Honor,
Is it discriminatory?
not necessarily, Your Honor,
Why?
because
What is the distinction between a widow of a Medal of Valor awardee?
maybe not yet, Your Honor. Maybe not yet.
Okay, I will accept that answer for now. But can you cover that in your memoranda?
Yes, Your
Whether
Honor.
this AFP circular is a valid circular on 2 points. Number one, what is the flow from a statutory provision?
Yes,
If
Your Honor.
not from a statutory provision, is it within the residual power of government? And can I address this similarly to the petitioners? Second, is the AFP circular itself valid, considering that it covers civilians and that there are civilians here, notably widows of chiefs of staff, but not, for that matter, widows of Medal of Valor awardees, widows of war heroes, they are not included. Don't you see the discrimination, Counsel?
Well, we will take that up in our memorandum, Your Honor. As far as I know, the widows are laid on top of their deceased husbands, Your Honor. It is only one plot.
That's good to know, but it's not necessary for my point. I am a believer in equality,
Yes.
and in my point of view, whether one is on top of the other is the couple's choice. But in any case, counsel, the point there is whether there is discrimination that will infect the validity of this AFP circular. My other point, which I raised to the Council of Marcos, the name Libingan ng mga Bayani was given by a president, a sitting president, to the Republic Memorial Cemetery. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
It is not by law.
It was by President Magsaysay ordered that, Your
Okay.
Honor. Proclamation.
Does President Duterte have the power to rename by proclamation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. But before he ordered the internment, he did not rename the cemetery. Am I correct?
Because he was busy, Your Honor, with his other advocacies.
Well, everybody's busy. This court is busy, but we have
Dangerous
to handle
drugs
the case.
and corruption, Your Honor.
Yes, same as this court. But yet we take time in order to attend to each and every case as if it were the most important issue in this country.
And besides, Your Honor, there is a presumption of regularity. So,
I am not challenging whether the action of the president was regular or not. That's not the point. The point is, you know for a fact that it was a proclamation creating the Libingan ng mga Bayani. And now, without changing the name, they are now, the president, according to you, verbally ordered the internment of the remains of the former president. Yet now, you take the position that the intention of government is not to honor the body of Ferdinand Marcos as the body of a hero. Although the Libingan's name is Libingan ng mga Bayani.
but
So, can you explain that?
as I said, Your Honor, in my opening statement, that is not the purpose to bury him as a hero. But by military standards, Your Honor, former President Marcos fits into the definition of a hero, as defined by the
Wait,
Lagman
excuse me,
petition, Your
Counsel.
Honor.
A while ago, in the this morning, before we took lunch, you said that there was no intention to honor. In fact, you read from your comment that there was no intention to bury the president as a
Yes,
hero.
we stand by that, Your Honor.
Okay.
However, based on the military standards given to a Medal of Valor awardee, he fits into the definition which was proposed by Petitioner Lagman, Your Honor.
A Medal of Valor awardee, is he or she a hero?
May I read into the records,
A Medal of
Your
Honor, please do not ignore my question.
Yes.
A Medal of Valor awardee, is he a hero or not a hero? Is he or she a hero or not a hero?
Based on the wordings of Presidential Decree 1687, Your Honor, it says here, the Medal of Valor is the highest award that may be given to a Filipino soldier in recognition of conspicuous acts of gallantry above and beyond the call of duty and in total disregard of personal safety. Whereas an awardee of the Medal of Valor for his supreme self-sacrifice and distinctive act of gallantry performed more than ordinarily hazardous service and deserves due recognition from a grateful government and people.
This is a presidential
the
decree,
definition,
Counsel?
Your Honor, in the
Is this a
Lagman
presidential
petition.
decree?
Yes, Your
Who
Honor.
issued the presidential decree?
This was issued March 24, 1980.
Who was the president that issued the presidential decree?
Well, judicial notice can be taken of that it was during the term of President Marcos, Your Honor.
Ferdinand Marcos, who is a Medal of Valor awardee, issued this presidential decree.
However, Your Honor, the Medal of Valor...
No, however, he had the power to issue the presidential decree. I'm not questioning that. Okay, my question here, which you ignored, is a Medal of Valor awardee a hero?
By the definition, Your Honor, he is a hero.
So therefore, you are going back against what you said in the comment.
But we will set aside that, Your Honor.
How can you set that aside?
We will set it aside
Which part
because
of Marcos will you not bury as a Medal of Valor awardee, and which part will you bury? It's the
Your
same
Honor,
person.
President Duterte's announcement is that he will allow the burial of Marcos not as a hero, but as a former president, a former veteran, and a soldier.
What
That's all, Your
honors
Honor.
will be given to him?
Simple graves.
Is it the honors that is normally given to a Medal of Valor awardee, or
No,
is
Your
it
Honor.
the honors given to a President of the Republic?
It is a simple graveyard military
I mean
honor.
the honors,
Military honor, Your Honor.
the pallbearers, the rituals that will happen, the number of guns that will salute, etc.
He will be given a 21-gun salute because he was a former president, Your Honor.
So full honors.
Not really full, Your Honor.
What is not full?
Because
Only
if he
19
were
guns.
given a full honor, it will be a state honors, Your Honor.
So no state honors
No
will be given
state
to the
honors.
President. Is there a difference between the ceremonies given to an ordinary soldier and the ceremonies given to a former president?
Well, under this scenario, Your Honor, since
Under the guidelines and under the practices of the military, is there a difference between the honors given to an ordinary soldier and the honors given to a Medal of Valor awardee or a president?
I am not an expert on that, Your Honor. May I call the assistance of our
Adjutant?
the adjutant, Your Honor.
Whoever knows.
Your Honor, all soldiers are given honor at the gravesite, depending on his rank.
Is there a difference between the rituals given to an ordinary soldier and a soldier that received the Medal of Honor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Medal of Valor, I'm sorry.
Yes, Your Honor.
What is the basic difference in brief?
The difference is in the number of soldiers that will participate in the funeral honors, and also depending on his rank. So a private can have a squad or a platoon. A colonel can have more number of troops. But the basic volley shots, which is 21 rifle volley shots, the same for from private to president. What differs only is on the gun salute, which is the artillery guns. For one-star general, there are 11 gun salute. For major general, there are a graduated number, Your Honor.
Is there a location where a major can be buried different from a Medal of Valor awardee? In other words, is there a separate set of plots for Medal of Valor awardees and separate for officers?
Yes, Your Honor. There is a distinct plot for the Medal of Honor
And
awardees.
in your preparations for the burial of the former president being done prior to the SQA, what was the kind of preparation being done? Was he going to be interred as Medal of Valor awardee, president, or ordinary major?
As far as the order that was given to us, Your Honor, for a president.
For a president.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. May I ask the Solgen just a few more questions?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, if I may add to my answer, in AFP Regulations 161-375, Your Honor, particularly paragraph I, it states here, who are qualified to be interred. Letter I, government dignitaries, and that would include probably the Chief Justice, statesmen, maybe the senators, national artists, and other deceased persons, Your Honor, whose interment or reinterment has been approved by the Commander-in-Chief, Congress, or the Secretary of National Defense. The other deceased persons can cover the widows, Your Honor.
Yes, but a widow of a president, automatically, there is no need for the Commander-in-Chief to approve because it's already in the list. Is that not correct? So there is a different treatment.
Well, because he's the highest ranking deceased to be interred in that
The widow?
cemetery, Your Honor.
The widow,
No, the Commander-in-Chief.
yes, the widow does not need any approval because it is already there in the list, correct?
Yes, but this is
And Anyway,
authorized because of the other persons, Your Honor.
Counsel, when was the intended date for the interment of the president, the former president?
Well, I think the counsel for the Marcoses can best address that, Your Honor.
Wait, this is not, I thought that the cemetery was a government cemetery, military at that, and that the preparations has to be done by government.
Yes,
Are you
Your
saying that the government does not know?
Well, we have a tentative date, and I believe it's September 18, Your Honor.
September 18?
Yes.
The order of Lorenzana, Secretary Lorenzana, to the military was dated August, correct? Sometime August.
I cannot remember the exact
Yes.
date, Your Honor.
Prior to that date, was there a request from any of the heirs of Marcos for an internment at September 11?
I have no personal knowledge of that, Your Honor.
Can you find out? Specifically, a July letter coming from the governor of Ilocos Norte to the Secretary of National Defense asking for internment on September 11. Can you find that out, whether it is in fact an existing letter, and submit that to the court for our guidance?
I will find out, Your Honor.
Yes, but as far as you are concerned, there is no written order from the president, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Secretary Lorenzana therefore acted on his own or upon the verbal instructions of the president or upon the request of the Marcos heirs? Which is which?
I have no personal knowledge on that, Your Honor.
Counsel, you are in the best position to find out. Would you agree with me? That you are in the best position to find out.
If you say so, Your Honor, it will be an honor for me to find out.
Yes. And that would make me very happy if you are able to give us the details.
Yes, Your Honor.
For that purpose.
I will
Okay.
make you happy, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. You are Catholic, I presume,
I'm a Christian, Your Honor.
Christian. And before God forgives Christians, must there be request for forgiveness?
Your Honor, when Jesus was nailed on the cross, there were two criminals beside him. They did not ask for pardon, and yet Jesus said to one of them, "You shall be with me in paradise."
Are you saying that the President Duterte is pardoning the Marcoses?
Pardoning the Marcoses?
Yes.
I do not know, Your Honor, but his policy is to have a national reconciliation and healing.
By burying him in the libingan ng mga bayani without any other act from the Marcoses. Because you know, you said Oslo, negotiations. Negotiations means give and take. So, what is given to the Marcos victims? Was there a request from the Marcoses to actually acknowledge some of the wrongs that were committed in martial law, and how nice that would have been for reconciliation, or for that matter, for forgiveness? Like, I think, and my hat off really to Mayor Sara Duterte, who took responsibility for whatever happened in Davao, although I know that she was not responsible. I know that she is a very good mayor of Davao. So was there a request from government to the Marcoses? Can you acknowledge, at the very least,
As
what
I
happened
said, Your
in martial
Honor,
law?
I'll try to find out, Your Honor. I have no personal knowledge on that.
You have no personal knowledge, and as far as you are concerned, right now, it is not material for your case.
What is material for me, Your Honor, is the political wisdom and propriety which is exercised by the President to allow the interment of Marcos.
Political wisdom or propriety subject to the parameters of law, correct?
Well, I cannot debate with you
Yes.
on that, Your
And
Honor.
part of law is Article 2, Section 11, correct? Of the Constitution. The state values the dignity of every human person
Yes,
and shall
Your Honor.
guarantee full respect for human rights.
Yes, to
Correct.
all persons, Your Honor,
Yes.
including the deceased.
So this government acknowledges that every human being has human dignity, and that it will fully, together with this court, fully respect human rights, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Justice Carpio, and then Justice Velasco.
May I ask the Solicitor General to approach the podium, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Let's go back to February of 1986. Former President Marcos was ousted from office as president and as commander-in-chief against his will, and he fled the country to Hawaii. That is a historical fact, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And as a result of the ouster, Cory Aquino became the head of a revolutionary government, correct?
That's right, Your Honor.
And in Republic versus Sandigan Bayan, we said, this court ruled that the revolutionary government during the interregnum period from the time of the revolution, February 22 to March 24, the day before the Freedom Constitution was adopted, during that almost 1 month period, we had no constitution, correct? That was the interregnum. That
If
was
my
the ruling.
memory serves me right, Your Honor, I think.
Okay, and we said that during the interregnum, the revolutionary government was not bound by the Constitution or by any law. They were the law in the Philippines. They were only subject to customary international law or treaties to which the Philippines was a party, correct?
That is the effect of a revolution, Your Honor, if
Yes.
successful.
Now, right after the revolution, several petitions were filed before this court questioning the legitimacy of the Aquino revolutionary government. And we dismissed all of those petitions, saying that the legitimacy of the Aquino government was beyond judicial review, correct?
I'm not
cannot be
aware of the
questioned.
particular decision, but if you say so, Your Honor, I
Yes,
believe you.
there were several petitions filed, and we all dismissed these petitions in May of 1986, saying that you cannot question the legitimacy of a revolutionary government that has succeeded. In fact, the revolutionary government asked the members of the court to submit their resignations, and the members of the court resigned. Correct?
I suppose so, Your Honor.
You cannot, because the revolutionary government succeeded. It's now the law, and it cannot be questioned. Okay? Now, so the acts of the revolutionary government in ousting Marcos as the president and as commander-in-chief is now beyond judicial review, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And President Ramos, of course, was ousted against his will. He tried to remain as president, but he lost in that struggle. So he was ousted against his will, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
As they say, success has many fathers, but defeat is an orphan.
Yes, so he was ousted against his will. So the issue now turns on whether the ouster of President Marcos against his will as president and as commander-in-chief was a honorable or dishonorable separation from government service. Your position is it was an honorable separation from service. Is that what you're saying?
Let me put into proper context what I said, Your Honor, during the oral arguments. When I said that Marcos was not dishonorably discharged from military service, it means he did not commit a violation of the Articles of War, and he was not subjected to court-martial proceedings as a soldier, as a military
Yes.
officer, Your Honor.
Yes, but he was a military officer, major, long before he became a president, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So when he became a president, he was head of the civilian government and commander-in-chief, separate from his former position as major, correct? Separated, reverted, or terminated from service. It doesn't say military service because there are civilians in that list. So as long as you're separated from the service, correct?
Let us put into proper context again, Your Honor. When we say he was separated from service, it refers to the AFP rules regarding separation from an enlisted personnel, separated or reverted or dishonorably discharged. It is in the context of military
Yes, but it also
procedures, Your
says
Honor.
those who are not qualified are those who have been separated dishonorably from the service. In the listing of those who are qualified includes the president. You say he's a civilian, he's not a military man.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, but he will fall under that provision also. If he is dishonorably separated from service, he cannot be qualified also.
But he was never dishonorably discharged from military service,
So
Your
you
Honor.
agree that if he were dishonorably separated from the service, he would not qualify? If he were.
Well, Your Honor, at the time he assumed the presidency, until his
assuming.
ouster, he was a civilian.
Yeah.
He was not a military officer or enlisted personnel, Your Honor.
What I'm saying is under that provision, who are disqualified, that provision covers both civilian and military personnel separated from the service. Because in the listing of those who are qualified, you have many civilians there. The defense secretary, even the wife. So those who are disqualified are those who have been separated from the service dishonorably. So if the defense secretary has been separated from the service because of an anomaly, he will not be qualified under the AFP regulations, correct?
Well, if a defense secretary, Your Honor, who is not a military man,
Yeah, not a military man.
well, if he has been convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, then he will be
No, I
disqualified.
mean, he was separated because of an administrative case. You can also be dismissed, gross ignorance or whatever. Administrative, not conviction by a military tribunal, because the provision does not say conviction by a solely conviction by a military tribunal. It says those who have been dishonorably dismissed or separated. So if you are a civilian, you've never been in the military, you were dismissed from the service because of an anomaly, then you cannot be qualified under the regulations, correct?
Under the AFP regulations, Your Honor, to
Yes.
be interred at the libingan, if I'm a mere civilian and I'm not part of the list here, I cannot be interred there, Your Honor.
No, I'm saying that
I'm
there is
dead.
a defense secretary who's purely a civilian, never been in the military, and he was dismissed by the ombudsman in an administrative case. So he was dishonorably separated from the service. Is he now still qualified to be buried there?
Your Honor, if he's a civilian, he cannot be interred there, especially if he has been guilty of committing a crime involving
No, I'm
moral
not talking
turpitude,
of-
Your Honor.
I'm not talking of crime. I'm talking of an administrative case. He was dismissed by the ombudsman in an administrative case. You can be dismissed in an administrative case.
The standard of the military, Your Honor, for dismissal is that he must have been court for military officers.
What does the
He should be
regulation say?
court-martialed for violation of articles of
What
war.
does the regulation say? Can you read it? The provision on this, on...
Can I refer
yeah,
to my
get
notes,
it.
Your Honor? Your Honor, I'm reading from the AFP Regulations 161-375. It states here, Your Honor, that In 4A, Your Honor, it says here, personnel, referring to military personnel, Your Honor, enlisted personnel who were dishonorably separated, reverted, discharged from service. The context is military, Your Honor.
Personnel. Does it say military?
Because this regulation refers to military personnel, Your Honor.
Can you read the entire provision?
Starting from page 1, Your Honor.
That proviso on who are not qualified.
Well, let me start briefly with the definition of terms. It refers to personnel in active service. It's here, Your Honor, in 2A. And in 4A, personnel who were dishonorably separated, reverted, discharged from the service, referring to those in active service in the military, Your Honor.
So when you say personnel, you don't consider civilian personnel of government. You only refer to military personnel.
Yes, because of the terms used, Your Honor, dishonorably separated, reverted, and discharged from the service, which are military terms, Your Honor.
No, you can be dishonorably separated, terminated from service if you are in the government.
But not in the context of this AFP regulation 161-375,
So if
Your
a
Honor.
person, a DND official, secretary of the DND is dismissed by the ombudsman from service for graft and corruption, he can still be buried there because he is not a military personnel and that provision will not apply. Is that what you're saying?
Because he's not a military personnel, he does not fall under 4A, Your Honor.
But it says personnel, it does not say military.
Because personnel should be tied up with the definition of terms active service, Your Honor.
So you are saying that the civilians who are listed in that enumeration who are qualified are absolutely qualified to become to be buried, because even in the last portion there, authorized personnel, you are saying that the term authorized personnel would refer also to military personnel.
Well, probably, Your Honor, because the military doesn't have jurisdiction over civilians. So this classification of personnel or authorized personnel refers to military in active service.
Yeah,
Your
so
Honor.
the point is, that is your interpretation. So in no instance can a civilian who is listed there can be disqualified because the disqualifications do not apply to civilians. The disqualifications, as you said, apply only to military personnel.
They are part of another classification. But anyway, Your Honor, to cut the time, Your Honor, may we just submit in our memorandum all our arguments that will touch on your
Okay,
questions, Your
counsel,
Honor.
you may do so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Velasco.
On head of the Philippine Veterans Administration Office.
General Restituto Aguilar, Your Honor.
General. You're aware of Proclamation number 208, series of 1967. Well,
Yes, sir.
it reserved 142 hectares in Fort Bonifacio military area, reservation. And this was declared to be the proposed site of the libingan ng mga bayani. Okay, and this was declared, this was reserved as for the purposes of a national shrine.
Yes,
Okay?
Your Honor.
Now, pursuant to Presidential Decree 1076, well, going back to that, no? From May 27, 1967, the libingan ng mga bayani was under the management of the National Shrine Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And when Presidential Decree 1076, series of 1977, was issued, no less by the former president, the functions of the National Shrine Commission was taken over by the Department of National Defense. Is that
Your
correct?
Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Right. And specifically, the office that was tasked to administer, maintain, and develop this libingan ng mga bayani is the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And under the PVAU is a military shrine service.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And what is your relation to the PVAU? Are you the head of the PVAU?
No, Your Honor. I am just a division chief that it was the military shrine service used to be a separate office of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office. But because eventually it was when in 2010 it was reorganized and it became just a division of the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office. And it's now called Veterans Memorial and Historical Division. That's the former Military Shrine Service, Your Honor.
Again, what is that?
Veterans Memorial and Historical Division.
Veterans Memorial and Historical
Division, Your Honor.
Division. And now, who is the head of this Veterans Memorial and Historical Division?
I am, Your Honor.
You are the head.
Yes, Your Honor.
And as head of the Veterans Memorial and Historical Division, what are your powers with respect to burial of people who may claim to be qualified under AFP Regulation G number 161375?
None, Your Honor.
None? Okay, if you have no
Can I explain why,
Okay.
Your Honor?
Yes, please. Yes.
The Libingan ng mga Bayani was originally a national military cemetery. In 1977, it was reserved to become a national military shrine. So,
Yes.
under my supervision are 9 national military shrines. Libingan ng mga Bayani is only one. We have from Ilocos up to Visayas, Your Honor. There are 9 others. The latest of which is Balete National Shrine.
So, spread across the country are
Yes, Your
several
Honor.
military shrines.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Now,
Go ahead.
as a national military shrine, reserved military shrine,
Yes.
Libingan ng mga Bayani continues to be an active national military cemetery. So it has a dual personality. One is being reserved as a national military shrine and as an active national military cemetery.
Okay.
So the aspect of planning for the development of it as a national shrine, it is under my responsibility, Your Honor.
Okay.
As a national military shrine,
Yes.
that's why it is the armed forces that issued a regulation defining who are qualified and who are not to be interred in this national military cemetery.
It is because this military shrine is under the jurisdiction of the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Yes, the national military cemetery aspect, Your Honor. Now, let me give you another example. Just the American military cemetery, which is just about 2 kilometers away from the Libingan ng mga Bayani. We have the American National Cemetery. It is both a national shrine for the Americans and also a national military cemetery. The difference between the American cemetery and the Libingan ng mga Bayani is that the American cemetery is no longer an active military cemetery. No one is being buried there anymore.
Okay.
While in the libingan ng mga bayani, it's not yet halfway, Your Honor.
It's not yet full.
It's not yet full. It's only about, I don't know if it's 40% already out of the total land area.
So it's good that you clarify that the Libingan ng Bayani is composed of two parts, two
Yes,
areas.
Your Honor.
One is actually intended to be a national military shrine.
Yes, Your Honor.
And the other one is the National Military Cemetery.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And who are qualified to be buried in the National Military Cemetery?
It is
Can a former president be buried in the area for the National Military Cemetery?
according to the AFP regulations, Your Honor, yes.
Yes. So who has the discretion of where the former president can be buried? The Tibao or the head of the AFP?
In the case of the of presidents, former and incumbent, in case of something happens,
Yeah.
it is the decision of the executive where the interment will be located on what specific category.
Okay. All right. Can you describe to us the process by which one is buried? Is it just a mere request to your office that for example, a soldier died and next of kin or the widow files a letter or request for the soldier to be buried there? The approval is with your office, correct?
No, Your Honor.
Who approves this request?
It should be the Chief of Staff for the soldiers, Your Honor, as far as I know, because we are not part of the decision-making process as far as interment is concerned. We are there because we are preparing the entire area to become a national military shrine when it's already filled up to capacity.
Okay.
That is our duty, Your Honor.
So the power to approve the remains of whoever are qualified under the regulation is with the whom? With the Secretary of National Defense or the Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, or who in particular?
As far as I know, there is already a definite policy, and it is in the AFP regulations, Your Honor.
So there is no more need to act on a certain request. Actually, the request is directed to an office under you or any agency or division under the DND. And they will just rely on the regulations issued under 161375 or under the provisions laid down in this regulation. You just apply it. And there is no need to use discretion whether to reject it or not. Is that what you're saying?
As far as PIBAW and Veterans Memorial and Historical Division is concerned, sir, we are not part of the decision-making process.
No. But who for example, if President Duterte did not declare in public that he approves or he orders the burial of the former president, and the now Congresswoman Imelda Marcos simply files a letter without announcing it, files a letter with the DND and requests that the remains of the former president be buried under pursuant to AFP Regulation G161375. Who has the authority or power to approve that in the DND?
As far as the regulation, Your Honor, I have read that as far as DND is concerned, it is the Secretary of National Defense, but not for a president of the Philippines, as far as I know.
But with respect to a former president who has the power to approve the burial there of the remains of the former president. You're not sure?
I'm not sure, Your Honor.
Okay,
The
so probably you
interpretation
can
could
just,
be, yes, sir.
Tell the Solicitor General about it, and he can include that in the memorandum. Because I'm just
Yes, Your Honor.
interested, because the rules under the AFP Regulation G161375 are quite clear. It's just a matter of implementing it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Another point that you can explain to us, and you can include that in the memorandum, is in case somebody objects to the request for interment, then who will decide on the matter? So that's what I'm trying to ask from you, because this appears to be purely a matter of implementing what are stated in the regulation.
Yes, sir.
And the only problem that will crop up is when somebody objects to the interment of the remains of somebody who claims to be qualified pursuant to the rules. Okay?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Your Honor. It's
okay.
not my area of competence. That's why I cannot answer.
It's okay.
Yes, sir.
Can I call on the Solicitor General for a few questions?
Response to your question, it is the sitting president who decides if the deceased president.
Any provision here in the rules that says it is the president, but
That is part of
that
his
is part of the power
Residual
of the
power
president.
of the president. Your
Even under EO 292, he has a power of control over
Yes,
the
Your Honor.
DND, and definitely has a power to approve requests like that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, Justice Kagiwa mentioned Presidential Decree 105. Okay. This is about national shrines.
Yes, Your Honor.
And libingan ng mga bayani has been reserved as a national shrine. That is the wording of the proclamation. I don't know if there is an official declaration that is already a national shrine. But for purposes of our discussion here today, we will concede that it's already a national shrine. And the national shrines were previously under the National Shrines Commission, correct?
The Presidential Decree number 105, Your Honor, lists which are those national shrines that were already declared under this PD 105.
Correct.
And it is, they are enumerated in paragraph 2 of the whereas provisions, Your Honor.
Is the libingan ng mga bayani covered by Presidential Decree 105?
It does not appear here in 105, Your Honor.
Yeah, but the second whereas says among, so probably we can consider the
And-
libingan ng mga bayani as a national shrine.
And
the
besides, Your Honor,
Yes.
besides, as testified by the representative of Tibao, the Libingan is a military cemetery. It is still in progress, Your Honor. Whereas here, in PD 105, there is already a national shrine existing, Your Honor.
Correct.
That's why there is a prohibition against desecration, acts of vandalism, by digging, excavating, defacing, causing unnecessary noise, to preserve the hallowedness of that particular national shrine already in existence, Your Honor.
Correct. Let us assume that Libingan ng mga Bayani is a national shrine. Although, as I said, Proclamation 207, series of 1967 merely reserved 142 hectares
And-
as the proposed site of the Libingan ng mga Bayani, and that it has reserved the 142 hectares as a national shrine. Although we're not aware, I don't know if there's already an official declaration that it's already a national shrine. But
Your Honor.
let us assume that it's already a national shrine. And the PD 105 says national shrines are hallowed places, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And
They should be the sites of specific places, like site of birth, site of exile, site of imprisonment, site of detention, or site of death, Your Honor,
yes.
of great
So
and eminent
we are
leaders.
talking of places.
Places, Your
These are
Honor.
places.
Yes,
Okay.
either they were born there, exiled there, imprisoned there, detained
Yes.
there, or died there. And nobody in the Libingan, as far as I know, died in the Libingan, Your Honor. They were interred there. They were already dead elsewhere,
They were
Your Honor.
already dead.
Yes,
That's
Your Honor.
correct. That's correct. Yeah. So anyway, leave it aside. Yeah. We said we can assume that the Libingan ng mga Bayani was declared as a national shrine. And pursuant to 105, the PD 105, the desecration of the same in the form of disturbing their peace and serenity by digging, excavating, defacing, causing unnecessary noise, and committing unbecoming acts within the premises is strictly prohibited. My question to you is, will the burial of the former president at the Libingan ng mga Bayani be considered a desecration of the Libingan ng mga Bayani?
No, Your Honor, for the simple reason that, as testified a while ago, it is still a work in progress. There are still many vacant lots. And naturally, if there is somebody who dies who is qualified to be interred, they have to dig, Your Honor. There's no way that they can be buried without digging, Your Honor.
So digging for purposes of burying somebody who is qualified to be buried there is not a violation of PD 105.
Definitely not, Your Honor.
Definitely not. Neither excavation, of course, is always almost the same as digging. But
Yes.
how about defacing? How about causing unnecessary noise?
Well, if there's digging, Your Honor, there will be noise, Your Honor.
There will be
So,
noise.
We have to
Okay.
interpret the law by its spirit, Your Honor. What is really the
And
intention
that
of
will not
this law?
desecrate the hallowed place which is the Libingan ng mga Bayani.
Yes, Your Honor.
How about committing unbecoming acts? Is the burial of the former president considered as an act, unbecoming act, or covered by that phrase? A commission of an unbecoming act?
I have to exercise my imagination, Your Honor. What is
Yes.
an unbecoming act? If there is an unbecoming act, they can be prosecuted, maybe, Your Honor, for acts of lasciviousness or some other criminal penal laws that may be applicable, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, but these things fall under the jurisdiction of the DND, correct? More particularly and specifically the PVAW and probably what the General mentioned here, the Veterans Memorial and Historical Division. So they are the ones who are implementing or is supposed to implement PD 105, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and do you think they have considered PD 105 when they are trying to follow the instruction of the, or are, if they are already in the process of implementing the directive of the President Duterte, have they considered PD 105 in implementing the order?
I have no personal knowledge, Your Honor, but it's very clear in PD 105 that the intention of the law is to maintain the physical integrity of of an erected shrine, Your Honor, or to preserve the hollowness by banning unnecessary noise or other acts that will somehow desecrate the hallowed place that it is, Your Honor. But in a military cemetery like the Libingan, there are persons who die, and some of them are qualified, so they have to be buried and interred. So we cannot prevent digging so that they can be buried, and of course the attendant noise to such an act, Your Honor.
Well,
A contrary interpretation, Your Honor, would result in an absurdity in the application of the provisions of 105. And we have to construe the law so that it will not be absurd, Your Honor.
the petitioners may argue that if the former president is buried there, then there may be a lot of activities that can be undertaken by people who just strongly resist the burial of the former president, and this may cause the desecration of the place, because there will be possibly untoward incidents that may occur the moment or after the burial of the former president. Can't you consider that as already within the ambit of Presidential Decree 105?
Your Honor, in fact, the President Duterte already said they are free to conduct protests, provided, Your Honor, they will not block the streets and they will not commit any criminal act while they are protesting. It's part of their freedom of speech and expression, Your Honor.
Okay, can you include a discussion on these prohibited acts in your memorandum?
Yes, Your Honor.
So
we
that
will.
you will have
Yes.
time to think about the meaning of the acts prohibited under the presidential decree.
Yes, Your Honor.
The petitioner cited several conventions, treaties. What's your position on this? That they are not applicable?
Your Honor, I'm sorry. Were you referring to the UN principles of reparation, Your Honor?
Well, whatever they cited in the petition, you should have. Whatever they cited there. But what's your position on this? Because they're saying this can be the basis for the rejection of the, probably the nullification of possibly the order
yes.
of the president in ordering the burial of the former president. Because under the Constitution, the general accepted principles of international law are part of the law of the land. Okay? So that's why that's what I'm asking from you. What's your position on this?
Our position is, Your Honor, the state has already complied with the pertinent international laws and norms through the enactment and availability of legislations or judicial remedies, Your Honor, including but not limited to the Philippine Act on Crimes Against International Humanitarian Law, Genocide, Other Crimes Against Humanity, RA number 9851, the Anti-Enforcement or Involuntary Disappearance Act of 2012, which is in RA number 10353, the Anti-Torture Act of 2009, RA number 9745, the National Human Rights Consciousness Week Act of 2002, RA number 9201, the Human Rights Victims Reparation and Recognition Act of 2013, which is RA number 10368, as well as the rules regarding writ of habeas corpus and writ of amparo, Your Honor. So these are among the laws that we have passed.
Yes, how about the international, the conventions or treaties that they cited as basis? So your position is what? That they cannot be a basis for claiming that the former president cannot be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani? Is that your position?
Your Honor, there is nothing in these laws that prohibits the burying of a deceased former president at the
Okay.
libingan, Your Honor.
So that's your position that these that the conventions or treaties they cited are not applicable.
Yes, we will include that in our memorandum, Your Honor.
But do you agree that these are generally accepted principles of international law? These conventions that they cited, do
The
you
UN
agree
principles,
that, what?
I'm sorry, the
Go ahead,
UN
go ahead.
principles of reparation and impunity is not a treaty, Your Honor. It's not a customary international law and not part of the generally accepted principles of international law. These principles are not legally binding, being mere principles, Your Honor.
So you're saying it's not part of
We
the
will
law?
discuss that at length in our memorandum, Your Honor.
Okay, and there's nothing to incorporate into our municipal laws because you're saying
Yes,
that
Your
these
Honor.
are not actually part of the generally accepted principles of international law. That's your position,
They are what is considered soft law, Your Honor.
soft laws.
Yes.
And even if they're applicable, you're saying that even if you say that even if you concede that they are generally accepted principles of international law, that they are not applicable to the issue at bar
Yes,
before
Your
the
Honor.
court now.
Correct, Your Honor.
So you better just put it in your memorandum.
Thank
Explain
you
it
very
further.
much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor General.
Justice Bernabe.
Okay, may I call on the Solicitor General again? Okay, Solicitor.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I was about to take a rest.
You earlier stated that there is no concrete definition of the term hero. Is that correct?
There is
The
no...
term, no concrete definition of the
Yes,
term
Your Honor. Yes.
hero.
Yes. According
So-
to the Lagman petition, the hero is a warrior. According to them, Your Honor.
So would you agree that there is no legal regulation which confers the status of a hero to a particular individual?
As far as I know, Your Honor, there is none. However, in the military regulations, in the Medal of Valor awardee, there is a description of what he did, which I believe is a description of a warrior hero, Your Honor.
Okay, but in general, being called a hero is a matter of public perception.
Yes, Your Honor. Even the vilest person can be a hero to somebody else, Your Honor.
No, you also earlier stated that not all those buried at the libingan are heroes.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you cannot necessarily attribute any historical or cultural importance to a person who has been given the privilege of being buried at the libingan.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, insofar as Marcos is concerned, what historical or cultural significance would you give if Marcos is buried at the libingan?
According to the President, Your Honor, he will be buried there because he was a former president, a veteran, and a soldier.
Now,
That's all, Your Honor.
how else would you remember Marcos based on common public knowledge?
Well, Your Honor, he was a president of the Philippines. As I said in my introductory speech, Your Honor, just like Caesar, the evil that he does lives after him. The good is oft interred in their bones. There are also some good things that Marcos did, Your Honor. But of course, it is now outweighed by the alleged evil things that he did.
Would the description of him change if you bury him at the Libingan?
Your Honor, beg your
Would
pardon.
the description of him change, like as a former dictator or an authoritarian?
A former president of the Philippines and a soldier, Your Honor.
Okay, but whatever bad description, the descriptions whether bad or good, would it change when you bury him at the Libingan?
No, Your Honor.
It will not.
It will not.
Now, is there a legal provision that says that the facts of Marcos being a war veteran, a Medal of Valor awardee, and former president is erased by his exile from the Philippines?
Was erased by his exile, Your Honor. But he was forcibly,
I mean, the exile based on popular will. Would his being a Valor awardee, a Medal of Valor awardee, his being a veteran, a World War veteran, or a former president, would all of those qualifications be erased by his exile
no,
in
Your
the
Honor.
Philippines by popular will?
No, Your Honor.
Is there a legal provision that says otherwise?
Your Honor, as far as I'm concerned, his being buried there will not erase anything, Your Honor, because there are already, in fact, there are already Supreme Court decisions concerning the martial law era. So it will not erase anything, Your Honor. He will just be given his final rest by President Duterte because he was a former president and a soldier.
So you're saying that these are already earned
Yes, Your Honor.
and therefore can no longer be erased.
Correct, Your Honor.
Now, let's go to Section 11, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution that states that the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. Now, do you agree with petitioner's stand that this is a self-executing provision? Or is this a policy which needs to be mapped out in an actual law for it to be enforceable?
I believe this is a policy, Your Honor. Guidelines for Congress to legislate.
So it's not a
laws.
self-executing provision, in your
Yes.
opinion?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, that would be all, Counsel.
Thank you.
Justice Velasco and then Justice Perez. Velasco, I'm sorry. Hardileza. Sorry. Justice Hardileza, because this is the second round already of Justice Perez, no? And you haven't had your first round yet. Si Justice Hardileza, okay.
Mr. Soldian,
Good afternoon, sir.
I just have a few questions. I was taking notes in the exchange you had with Justice Ben, and you remember when he said, what about the decisions of the Supreme Court? And I think your answer was, well, the epithets, I think you used the word, the epithets used against President Marcos referred to his tenure as president.
I said that, Your Honor, in my speech, referring, Your Honor, to the arguments of the petitioners.
Yes. Now, I remember you said those decisions, the epithets used, and I will use a different word. I will use the word characterizations.
Yes, Your Honor.
The 20 or 18 cases cited characterized President Marcos either as a dictator or as a president who engaged or committed plunder, especially of the economy. So I will not use the word epithets, but those were the characterizations.
Yes.
Now, the characterizations, and if I remember what you said, refer to his tenure as former president.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, when we say now, so you concede that they refer to his former tenure?
Not the entire tenure, Your Honor, but towards the last part of his tenure.
Well, during part of his tenure.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, the theory of the government, correct me, is simple. President Marcos should be interred because he was, as you said, a former soldier and a veteran. Number two, he was a president,
Yes.
former president. Number three, is a statesman.
And a Medal of Valor awardee
Yes,
also.
as a soldier, he was a Medal of Valor holder. So essentially three: a soldier, bemedaled soldier; number two, former president; and number three, a statesman. Now, I will go now to the decisions referred to by Justice Ben. These were decisions of the Supreme Court, and we know decisions of the Supreme Court become part of the law of the land.
Yes, Your Honor.
You have also the Reparation Act, Republic Act 100 something, right? Now, strictly, the Reparation Act commits public funds to be paid to persons who can prove that they were victims of martial law, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
However, the Republic Act also characterizes certain acts committed during martial law. And this is, I think, the argument of Professor Barry Gutierrez about legislative acts. Do you remember that?
Yes, Your
So the characterization is that acts were committed during the tenure of President Marcos, and statutes are part of the law of the land. And then you have the view of the CHR that there is a continuing international commitment with respect to victims of human rights violation. Now, these three groups, the decisions of this court, the statute, and the international commitments that we have, at the very least, you concede that they refer to part of the tenure of the president.
Yes, Your Honor.
Refer to. My next question is, are they relevant to ascertaining the question of whether, as president, and I'm not into whether he is a hero, and I am not into whether there is desecration. The question, very narrow, is, as president, are those decisions of this court, the statute and international commitments, relevant to the question of whether, as president, he is qualified legally to be buried at the Libingan?
They are not relevant, Your Honor.
And why is that?
Because there is no logical connection between the premise, Your Honor, and the fact that he's qualified to be buried at the Libingan.
I will not argue with you whether there is a logical connection. And if you imagine this as a trial court, I will not argue with you whether your objection will be denied or upheld. But help me, because this is the most important part of this case, that I have to make up my mind when I have to make up my view on this case.
Yes, Your Honor.
Assuming, and you are been a trial lawyer for so long, assuming, for the sake of argument, that your objection on relevancy is denied. And the trial court now asks you, assume it is relevant, what is your answer? Why is it that the trial judge or the justice now should not consider all of these decisions, the legislative facts set forth in the reparation law and the international commitments,
Okay.
insofar as his being president is concerned?
Because the pending cases before our, let's say, the Human Rights Victims Compensation Board and the Ombudsman and other venues, Your Honor, will not be affected even if this court allows President Duterte to execute his campaign promise to allow the interment of President Marcos.
May I
Libingan.
rephrase my question, Mr.
Yes, Your
Soldian? My question is very simple. Assume that they are relevant. Assume that the three matters, the rulings, the 20 and 18 rulings characterizing the tenure of President Marcos are relevant. the legislative findings in the Republic Act on reparation and the international commitment. Assume they are relevant. You have to convince me that, being tagged a former dictator, being tagged a person who plundered, is something that will not affect the ability of a person who was president to be buried. Meaning, in other words, why? And I'm not into the issue of hero. Why is it that a president who plundered, why is it a president who was a dictator? Why is it a president? How come a president who committed human rights violation, according to this court, deserves to be buried in the libingan?
Okay, for two reasons, Your Honor, even if arguendo it's relevant. Number one, the matter rests solely and exclusively on the presidential prerogative, Your Honor, as president under his residual powers. Number two, this is a question of wisdom, Your Honor, which is a political question. And number three, Your Honor, he's not disqualified under the rules of the AFP regulations. And therefore, he can be buried there.
The answer that he is not disqualified really centers on, I think, your argument that because the regulation says president, it doesn't have any reservation, then President Marcos is qualified.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, we have learned that decisions of this court as law, statutes as law, are deemed written into statutes and deemed written in, perforce with more reason, in administrative issuances. And that's precisely the argument of the petitioners. If you deem them all written in, why is it that these issuances, decisions, will have no bearing on the qualification or of President Marcos to be buried as president?
Well, Your Honor, the Supreme Court cases may have a different factual milieu, Your Honor. The issue now before this court is whether or not the decision of President Duterte to allow the interment of former President Marcos is a justiciable question. Because we believe, Your Honor, and that has been our position, that this is a matter of policy of wisdom or propriety that is to be decided by the President, Your Honor, for a public purpose.
I understand the political question defense that you have raised, but again, if you imagine that the trial judge tells you, and the justice tells you, if you set aside the political question doctrine, there is a question of whether President Duterte has acted in grave abuse. And therefore, it goes back to the same question. The question to the President is, given the decisions of this court, given the legislative facts stated in the Republic Act, and given our international commitments, isn't it grave abuse of discretion to allow the President as President, and I'm not into heroes, based on all of this, Mr. Soldier?
No, Your Honor. As far as I know, the Supreme Court cases are civil in nature and not criminal. And thus, there is no conviction of any criminal case involving moral turpitude that will disqualify Marcos from being buried at the libingan, Your Honor.
Let me go quickly into your theory that the President should also be buried as a statesman. His being a statesman, I understand, is because he was formerly a congressman, then a senator, Senate president, and later a president.
Yes, Your Honor.
So again, based on the same line of questions that I have, your claim to the right to be buried based on being a statesman, part of it will depend on the question of whether or not it is relevant that the question of the decision of this court and of the legislative facts can affect his being a statesman. Is that correct?
It will not affect, Your Honor.
Well, you're just to understand the theory of the government. It will not affect again because you are saying as president they do not affect.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, your theory now as a soldier, the right to be buried as a soldier.
Yes.
Now, obviously, the decisions of the court and the Republic Act and the international commitments do not refer to and are, I will concede, completely irrelevant to his being a soldier. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, how will you answer the the arguments of the petitioner that you cannot divide the persona of the president to being a soldier and being a president at some point in time? Meaning, if we grant your theory, the government should win just on the fact that he was a former soldier, and therefore all of his acts as president are irrelevant to this case. Is that the case? Is that the theory of the government?
Well, Your Honor, since we're talking about his military background, he was a military officer who was not dishonorably discharged from military service, and in fact, he was honorably separated and discharged, Your Honor.
I
So
grant that,
he
Mr.
became
Soldian. That's why I'm
Yes.
saying your theory would be that all of the laws cited, the Republic Act on reparation, and since they do not have anything to do with his being a soldier,
Yes.
the government should win its case hands down on the fact that his being a soldier is enough, and all of these decisions of the court are completely irrelevant.
That could be the case, Your Honor.
That
Because
could be, or isn't that your case? So that even if there is a quarrel between you and the petitioners on the effect of the decisions of this court, your core case is as a soldier.
Yes.
He has not been dishonorably discharged. Therefore, he should be buried.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Soldier.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Justice Perez.
Just a few questions so that I can have a clear view of the case at hand. Is the burial or the interment of the remains of President Marcos something which is of national concern, or is this the concern only of the human rights victims?
Right now, Your Honor, I believe this is the primary concern of the human rights victims. Because if we gauge the election to be a referendum, whether or not people will vote President, at that time, candidate Duterte, on one of the pillars of his advocacy, which is for national healing, and that includes allowing Marcos to be buried, he got a landslide number of votes, Your Honor. And to me, that is vox populi. That is the voice of the people.
You are saying, therefore, that in effect, President Duterte is the president not only of the human rights victims, but of the rest of the population of this beloved country of ours.
Correct, Your
And
Honor.
that?
Yes, Your Honor.
There may be a true difference of opinion between the human rights victims and those, of course, who were not such victims.
Well, Your Honor, we cannot avoid the difference of opinions, but the human rights victims are being attended by the state through the other venues available to them, Your Honor. The burial of Marcos has nothing to do with that. It cannot demean or reduce whatever compensation they can get and the non-compensation benefits that they will get, Your Honor.
Let's leave the topic.
Yes, Your Honor.
May I go to the very reason why we are here engaging in this exercise, and that is to determine whether or not the President, in allowing the burial of the remains of FM, committed grave abuse of discretion. Is it not a fact that the issue on one side is whether or not President Duterte has the authority to allow the burial. And on the other hand, whether or not the human rights victims have a right that is violated by the burial of the remains of Marcos. And that on these two sides of the issues, there is certainly at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, no unanimity of opinion, no definite ruling, no agreement on all points. In other words, this, on 2 points, the authority of President Duterte to allow the burial and the rights of the human rights victims to exclude the burial of Marcos, or that they have a right which is going to be violated by the burial. That both issues have thus far remained unsettled. And if you, and I think I addressed this to the petitioners also, if that is the case, you can say it is not. How can we say that Duterte's reliance on an FP regulation which is existent at the time and which has not yet been declared as a nullity be an exercise of caprice, which is the definition of what grave abuse of discretion is, and that the disregard of the right of the human rights victims, which has yet to be established by one authority, is likewise whimsical. I mention this because of the basic fact that we are here on the issue of whether or not there was grave abuse of discretion in that oral order of the President to implement his election promise. I will not demand that you answer this right now because the petitioner also have a right on that issue. I will just request that both sides look into this matter. Second, and I direct this to you, Mr. Solicitor General.
Yes, Your Honor.
If I get the position of the petitioners correctly, their position is that the Constitution which we have right now has, and I borrow the term of the petitioner, constitutionalized the evil of Marcos. Please include that in your memorandum, whether that is acceptable or not, considering, of course, the fact that we have gone beyond the revolutionary government, having in fact, the President Corre having in fact convened a constitutional commission to write not the revolutionary constitution, but the constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, which was ratified by the people. And whether or not that constitutionalized evil has been affected by the fact that from that time until today, several decades have passed, and there have been how many changes of administration already. Again, I will request that this be included in your discussion so that personally, I can have a full grasp of the issues at hand. And I also request this of the petitioners. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will comply with your wish, Your Honor.
Solgen, please do not leave. I know you want a rest, but please. Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you provide us with an idea of how much the government spends to maintain the libingan ng mga bayani both as a national military shrine and as a military ceremony, a cemetery rather.
You mean the expenses for the
Yes.
burial, Your Honor?
Yes. No, no, no. The entire area. It's 142 square meters. Maybe the PVAW head can tell us how much is being spent to maintain the entire 142 hectares.
May I yield the
Yes.
rostrum to him?
If you don't have the data with you,
I don't have, Your Honor.
let's ask him. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I do not have the data also, but we will provide you with the annual budget for libingan ng mga bayani in its maintenance.
Is the 142 hectares intact?
No, Your Honor.
What do you mean?
Part of this have been bisected by C5. A part of it was already on the other side of the road, and it cannot. It's no longer contiguous, and that part cannot be used as a national military cemetery.
You submitted through the Adjutant General descriptions of how the ceremonies are going to be conducted. These are still maintained today, the kind of honors that you are giving?
Yes, Your Honor.
How much, what is the size of a burial plot?
For a president, I think it's 100 square meters, Your Honor. 10 meters by 10 meters for a
What?
president of the Philippines.
10 meters because there is there's a lot of free space in between. The tomb would be how big?
I have no exact idea.
The size of the digging that would be made for the tomb to be for the remains to be buried.
I think it's in the AFP regulations, Your Honor.
Do you have them? Can someone assist him, please? So the excavation is going to be made by the engineering personnel of the AFP.
I beg your pardon, Your Honor.
Continue, if you know the size.
According to the AFP regulation, for President, the grave lot is 10 by 10 square meters, or 100 square meters, Your Honor. The grave, it's not specified.
The grave itself would be maybe about 2 by 3 meters. They would not, 2 by 3 would be good enough, or yeah, 2 by 3 would be a normal sized area. At least that's even bigger. That would be even bigger, right? Because you will have about 10 feet by 6 feet.
I really have not.
And on top of the tomb is grass planted. What is it? Will there be an abutment, or will there be a portion of the casket or the mausoleum which will be on top of the that specific grave digging?
There are no mausoleum authorized for the libingan ng mga bayani, Your Honor, because
So plain grass,
or marble.
marble, the marble epithet, what is it?
It's just because as in the case of the three other presidents, there is no tomb. It's only about it's still a digging. They should have to bury the casket.
It must be underground.
Underground, Your Honor.
There cannot be any display of any remains,
No, Your
preserved
Honor.
or otherwise.
No, Your Honor. The only tomb that is above ground, supposedly, is the tomb of the unknown soldier. All the rest are below ground.
There is a simple marker. Is that how the other presidents have their tombs? Is there a simple marker?
There are, as in the case of President Garcia, it's a plain tomb, marble, and with inscription of the name of the president and also the first lady.
And the entire 100 square meters will be planted with grass.
Yes, Your Honor.
What kind of grass?
Supposedly bluegrass or normally they are supposed to be plain Carabao grass, supposedly.
Plain Carabao grass or bluegrass?
Bluegrass.
And this is watered regularly and maintained?
Yes, Your Honor, by the members of the Grave Services Unit of the Philippine Army.
So there is an entire unit that maintains all the lots?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So would you have an idea how much a lot would be at the heritage?
No idea, Your Honor.
I think, have an idea, I think they would really cost a lot of money. So is it then, because of the amount of personnel that you are going to deploy to the area to undertake the services, the maintenance, and the allotment of the area itself, there is then public funds that are being deployed. Is that
Yes, Your-
correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So public funds are going to be deployed.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you will please tell us how much that would cost us? Can you submit the documents to enlighten us on that matter?
Yes, Your Honor. We'll submit the annual budget for each, for this entire libingan ng mga bayani.
Thank you. As well as when each ceremony or which for what is indicated there for a president, because that is the intention to give him 100 square meters, right?
Yes.
10 by 10.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm not finished. Soljan, please. Soljan, would you therefore concede that there is already public money that is going to be spent?
Well, I suppose so, Your Honor. It's a military cemetery and there are
Yes.
expenses, Your Honor.
And the Constitution requires that each expenditure be for a public purpose.
The public purpose insofar as the interment of the President is for the the policy of the President to restore national healing and reconciliation, Your Honor, of different...
And you have agreed, and you would agree, that even residual powers are circumscribed by the Constitution and the laws. There is no such thing as an untrammeled ability to exercise presidential prerogatives.
As a rule, yes, Your Honor.
Well, it better be a rule, otherwise this court has no purpose in existence, for existing, right? Mr. Solicitor General?
Unless there is a revolution, Your Honor.
Okay. So unless there is a revolution, but we are
Yes, Your
talking
Honor.
of a Supreme Court that is still existing.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So, Mr. Solicitor General, you agree therefore that under our government of laws, and you are facing us now because you are sworn to uphold the Constitution and the laws, not under a revolution, but under the 1987 Constitution. That is correct, Mr. Solicitor General.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. When you say that there is a campaign promise, that is a political purpose. That is not a defined public purpose. So we go now to the only thing that remains, which is not to fulfill a campaign promise because that's a political promise. And you cannot use public money to fulfill a political promise unless I don't know of, unless there is a statute or a law somewhere that authorizes politicians to use a political promise per se as a justification for using public funds.
The
Okay?
political promise, Your Honor, has already metamorphosed into a public purpose, which is the concept of national healing, Your Honor, and reconciliation. That is a matter of public interest, Your Honor.
All right. And in relation to the various questions here, when you were saying that this is already a public policy, in other words, your theory is it is the President's judgment that national healing will be occasioned or facilitated by the burial of the former President in the libingan ng Magbayan. Is that it? At bottom? That is the justification for the public policy?
Among others, yes, Your Honor.
Well, tell me, any other? What are among others? That is, because I don't think you can persuade this court that a political campaign promise per se already becomes a legitimate public policy. You must really, as you, in your own words, make it metamorphose into
Yes.
an identified public policy. And your public policy, as you have formulated, is the burial of the former president in libingan ng mga bayani will usher in national reconciliation.
Yes, Your
Are
Honor.
you correct? Is it
Yes,
correct?
Your Honor.
Is
Yes,
there
Your Honor.
any among others?
Well, it has to be tied up with the other policies of President Duterte.
No,
Like-
with respect only to this, because well, there are other policies that might come to us, and we will then, at the time, look at them. But for now, we are looking only at the burial.
It's part of the psyche transformation of this nation.
The
Your Honor.
what?
To transform the psyche of this nation, Your Honor. Change, because President Duterte has been elected by more than 16,600,000 as
So
their
to
agent of
change
change.
our minds from what to what? What is the public policy now?
He wants a unified Philippines, Your Honor.
All right. So you are saying that the burial will create a psyche transformation. That's your term.
Yes, Your Honor.
And the Filipinos will be united because of this burial.
That is the hope, Your Honor, that with this will be a start of the national reconciliation, because we have to look also, to look beyond the needs of the human rights victims. There are also other provinces, tribes who want a reconciliation through by burying Marcos, Your
All
Honor.
right. So you are saying that the rights of the human rights victims, which under General Sarmiento's statement now number around 75,000 claimants, plus perhaps others more that will be identified in the future. 75,000 victims plus and their families. We must set this aside so that we can achieve national reconciliation.
Yes, Your Honor.
We must set them aside, their feelings about the matter, their opinions about the matter.
That well, Your Honor, the burial should not be taken in isolation with the other policies that the President is
But
doing.
we cannot examine all the other policies. There is only one thing before us, only the burial.
Yes, Your Honor.
I know, because I understand that the policies may be layered, because here among petitioners are even members of the political wings that are right now in Oslo, Norway. Mr. Ocampo, I understand, supporting the reconciliation, hope for reconciliation, and but that is another flank, and we cannot go there. So can we just focus our mind on the libingan issue? We do not have the facility to examine all the policies. So you're saying that the burial will facilitate national reconciliation.
Yes, Your Honor.
And
Definitely.
do you know, of course, about the means as against the objective test of law? In other words, the objective that is being trumpeted as the policy justification for the legitimacy of an action must coincide with the means sought. In other words, both the objective and the means must be legal. That is a truism in every review that we do. Is that correct, Mr. Solicitor General?
I suppose so, Your Honor.
All right. Now you are saying that the means of burying will usher in national reconciliation between whom and what?
Between the conflicting political forces and in this nation, Your Honor.
But the human rights victims are saying that they cannot be reconciled to that idea. In fact, it will deny that there is an acknowledgement of the fact that they have been victimized. And second, that it is a re-traumatization, the burial, and not their oral testimony here.
Your Honor.
How can you now square that? In other words, you are going to forcibly bring us to the situation where there is a very stringent opposition. Now, these human rights victims can march on the streets all they want, but they will still, the President will still push through with his decision to allow the burial at the libingan.
Your Honor, with all due respect, the victims have already been recognized under the law. In fact, 75,000 of them have filed their claims before the Human Rights Victims Compensation Board. So nothing, there will be no benefit that will be removed from the victims by the burial of Marcos at the libingan. The state recognizes, Your Honor, their sufferings.
All right. Let's go back. Anyway, you talked about their reparation eventual, no?
Yes, Your Honor.
The 10 billion pesos that had been set aside under the Human Rights Claims Act, where does it come from?
The 10 billion pesos, Your Honor?
Yes, that has been set aside.
I understand it comes from the Swiss deposit account of the Marcoses, Your Honor.
And the Swiss deposit account of the Marcoses was turned over to the Philippine government because it is their own private money, or is it government money?
You mean the 10 billion
Yes.
dollars, Your Honor?
Yes.
I believe, Your Honor, that is part of the ill-gotten wealth.
All
Your
right.
Honor.
So, in other words, money that had been stolen from the Filipino people itself is going to be paid for to the victims. Where is the reparation on the part of where is the acknowledgement, where is the confession, where is the penalty on the part of the Marcoses? In other words, actually what is happening is that the Filipino taxpayer is paying for the injuries. So the victims, are actually not being paid by Marcos' wealth because it was never his in the first place. They are being paid for by the taxpayer. Is that correct?
Your Honor, the acknowledgement is in the law itself.
No, by the Marcoses. I know. In other words, my children, my grandchildren will be part of those who are going to pay for the reparations to the human rights victims. Not the Marcoses.
Your Honor, we have no control over the Marcoses, whether or not they will apologize or not.
So-
we are defending the policy of the President to allow the interment of former President Marcos at the libingan for reasons that we have already stated, not only in our oral arguments, but in our pleadings, Your Honor.
So the policy is to allow the remains of the President to be buried at the instance of the family because there is this July 5 letter. Is that correct?
I have not seen that July 5
Well,
letter,
everybody
Your Honor.
has seen that July 5 letter. I'm sure you should have seen that letter also by now. And you can verify and ask the council if in fact there is such a letter or not. So it is at the instance of the family that a letter was written. Now the family has pending before them $900 million of claim by the Ombudsman. And there is an estimated $5 billion to $10 billion that had been stolen by the Marcos family. And the PCGG itself has been doing nothing but running after ill-gotten wealth. And the national debt ballooned from $2 billion to $20 billion, and we are still going to pay for it, estimates say, until 2025. So this is in relation to the question, actually, of Justice Hardeleza. Are our pronouncements so meaningless to you? The pronouncements not only of the constitutions, statutes, judicial pronouncements, even the statements that the Solicitor General itself has already laid down before the various international courts where we litigated the Marcos wealth issues as well as human rights violations in Hawaii. Are they so meaningless that all of them will be set aside so that we can justify under an AFP regulation that is just an administrative issuance by a caretaker of public property? Are they so meaningless that we set them all aside just so that the President can have his wish that he had orally conveyed?
Your Honor, during my oral arguments, I discussed about the 4 flawed premises, Your Honor. And I believe there is no relation, Your Honor, in the interment of the deceased President Marcos with the efforts of the government to provide for the human rights victims, Your Honor. It's non sequitur, Your Honor, please.
In other words, despite all the body of pronouncements, what we had said, and I think that the several organizations have already estimated the amount of debt we individually and our children and grandchildren will carry, the amount of ill-gotten wealth that had been stolen from the taxpayers, all of this. In other words, they, at the same time, will continue spending for the burial itself, the military honors, and the maintenance of the memorial lot for the remains of the former president. All of this because he believes that it is in line with his theory of national reconciliation.
I assure you, Your Honor, that it will not, the burial of President Marcos will not affect the government's effort to address the claims of the human rights victims, Your Honor.
But I had already indicated to you that actually it's the taxpayer and not the Marcos family that's going to pay for everything that is going to be given to the human rights victims. So how does it square with national reconciliation? We are forcing, the government is forcing the taxpayer to pay for the national reconciliation. The Marcoses may not have committed any act that shows an eagerness to move towards national reconciliation because I don't see any private money. I don't see any criminal indictment that they are serving. In fact, the court itself blames lawyers upon lawyers, the most brilliant lawyers in the country, all contriving to delay the cases, and it is in the decisions of the Supreme Court, to delay the pursuit of justice by the Filipino people. Now, the fact that it is going to, again, reopen all wounds, is it not then a continuation of impunity that the 1987 Constitution sought to put an end to?
No, Your Honor. I assure you again, the government will not abandon its cases against the Marcoses. There is no correlation between the burial and the effort of the state to compensate the human rights victims, Your Honor.
How can you put on an international face when you are going to push for the claims worldwide, and when the Marcos family will say, but look, Mr. Marcos is considered worthy of a memorial in the libingan ng mga bayani.
Well, Your Honor, I believe to shorten the discussion, Your Honor, may we be allowed to put all our arguments in our memorandum, Your Honor?
Maybe one of your Assistant Solicitor General can pick up on that argument.
Rest assured, Your Honor, we are not abandoning our international obligations.
How? How can you convince the court that first, our own pursuit for justice worldwide is not going to be stymied? How can we be believable as a country? How can anyone now believe in the Filipino sense of honor and dignity and our consistency between our actions, our pronouncements, and our past judicial decisions when the case is being made that the president, former president, should be buried in libingan ng mga bayani?
Your Honor, time and time again, we said that Marcos will not be buried there as a hero, Your Honor.
I thought you just said he is a hero. The
No.
moment he gets a Medal of Valor, he becomes automatically a hero by AFP regulations. In other words, you are going to use AFP regulations to force upon this court a legal definition of a hero and a legal definition of entitlement to burial in a libingan, which the legislature itself should be considered a memorial that must be kept hallowed and sacred. How
Your
do you
Honor-
square that? Whenever you want to immediately push your point, you use the AFP regulation. And then later on, you're basically to escape everything. You are reducing us to a court that will legitimize everything by virtue of an AFP regulation. What if we say the AFP regulation should never have been issued because it was an illegitimate exercise of determination of who are to be buried in a war memorial?
Your Honor, we are defending the government here, specifically the President. And we will abide by President Duterte's policy that he will allow the interment of former President Marcos, not as a hero, Your Honor. Even if the military regulations declare that he's entitled to the Medal of Valor, we will set that aside. He will be buried as an ordinary soldier and a former President of the Philippines. Nothing more, Your Honor.
Mr. Solicitor, your office has been called, you have been called the tribune of the people by the Supreme Court. And that is the degree of professional responsibility you actually owe by virtue of your office. You are aware of that?
Yes, Your Honor, and I use it wisely, Your Honor.
That means the tribune of the people, not only of those who voted for the president, but also the tribune of all Filipino people, including those who have been victims of the past.
Yes, Your Honor, we are not, this is not A against B, Your Honor. We want a reconciliation between A, B, C, D, E, Your Honor.
Now, HR 10, RA 10368 itself already incorporates international law doctrines into domestic law. Correct? Including the right to an effective remedy. The law says that it is a duty. Correct? It has become jus cogens. Correct? That is Section 2 of RA 10386.
May I refer to my notes,
Yes,
Your Honor?
please.
Your Honor, the UN, if we are referring to the UN principles of reparation and
RA 10368 already considers the Universal Declaration, the ICCPR, and they characterize the duty to enact domestic legislation to give effect and the duty to give effective remedy already as jus cogens. Is it not correct?
Yes, and we have given that under the law, the right to remedy and reparation, Your Honor.
Have you looked at the congressional deliberations of RA 10368?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, let me bring your attention to that. Do you have the congressional deliberations? Petitioners, did any of you try to bother about the history? I'm sorry, my law professor days are being rekindled by my seeing Barry Gutierrez here. You don't have a copy. Now, in the UP College of Law, we look at congressional deliberations as sources of interpretation. All right. The explanatory note of House Bill number 54, which became RA 10368, reads, and I look at the paragraph which says no amount of money in the explanatory note. It says, among the important features of this bill are, Solicitor General, it's okay, you can remain at the podium because I will shortly be immediately calling upon you. Among the important features of this bill are no amount of money can really be enough to compensate our living heroes and those who survive by their kinds for the democracy that our people are now enjoying. No amount of money can really be enough to compensate our living heroes. In other words, the enumeration of remedies in the RA 10368 are not sufficient to give effective remedy to the victims of human rights violations, which, according to Section 2 of the same Republic Act, has already become a peremptory norm of international law from which there can be no derogation.
Are you asking me a question now, Your Honor?
Yes, have you seen that? This means that the view of the Republic Act is the compensation, including the financial and technical assistance, is not enough to compensate our living heroes. In other words, it refers to the jus cogens rule of giving an effective remedy. And will you agree that if this court were to say that President Marcos cannot be buried in the libingan ng mga bayani, that can be an effective remedy? Because under our system of laws, judicial decisions form part of the law of the land and is a legal remedy.
With all due respect, Your Honor, I do not agree. In fact, in this law, there are non-monetary reparations in Section 5. There is also the motu proprio recognition, and there in Section 26, the role of victims. They shall be given recognition by enshrining their names in the roll of human rights victims to be prepared by the board. There shall be a memorial museum library established in their honor and in memory of the victims of human rights violations, whose names shall be inscribed in the roll, and a compendium of their sacrifices shall be prepared and may be readily viewed and accessed in the internet. And for this purpose, the Memorial Museum Library Compendium shall have an appropriation of at least 500 million pesos. And also the Human Rights Violations Victims Memorial Commission for the establishment, restoration, preservation, and conservation of the Memorial Museum Library Compendium in honor of the human rights victims during the Marcos regimes. Apart from the other laws, Your Honor, in favor of the human rights victims.
Do you understand that the duty to satisfy under international law requires the following, among others: satisfaction for human rights violations, B, verification of facts and full public disclosure, D, official declaration or judicial decision restoring the dignity, the reputation, and the rights of the victim and of persons closely connected with them, F, judicial and administrative sanctions against persons liable for the violations. How can we be considered as complying with the international law obligation if we are extolling the human rights violator instead of imposing an administrative violation against him and the persons connected with him?
Your Honor, these UN principles, with all due respect, I believe they're not customary international law and not generally accepted principles of law because these are absent, the state practice and the opinion juris, Your Honor.
It is the heirs of President Marcos who will be requesting and who will be with him with the remains at the time of the proposed burial. Is it not correct?
I beg your pardon, Your Honor.
The family of the late president will be with him and in fact are the ones who are petitioning for the burial to take place. Is it correct?
As far as I know, Your Honor, I have not read the letter, but that was a campaign promise of the president before he assumed the presidency.
We still have criminal cases against the family, and the ombudsman saying that while it will not affect their ability to run after, because it talks about civil liability and criminal liability, it does not talk about our international law obligation. Is it not a fact that we are also giving honor to the family of the late president?
Well, Your Honor, he will be interred there as a soldier and a former president, not a hero.
Is it not a fact that in fact RA 10386 talks about restoration to the victims of human rights violations not only committed by the president but also by his family? Is it not in fact that the law itself, RA 10386, refers to the family?
May I look at
As
the provisions, Your Honor?
perpetrators of all the wrongs that have been done to this country.
May we be allowed, Your Honor, to answer all your questions in our memorandum, Your Honor?
So, I have, okay, that part you can answer in your memorandum. Are we not in fact disacknowledging the pain or the suffering of the human rights victims by according to them the burial of the former president in the libingan ng mga bayani?
Well, Your Honor, our position is the burial of Marcos at the libingan will not in any way pardon his mistakes during the martial law regime, as we have stated in our comment, Your Honor. As in fact, martial law history is already imprinted in our executive, judicial, and legislative books. Written history, Your Honor, cannot be erased by the mere expedient of burying Marcos at the libingan.
Are you still clinging to your theory that the president's power arises from his power to reserve lands for public purposes? Is that it?
We have,
Or are you now not pushing that anymore? Because if you're not pushing that anymore, I will not ask you anymore on that.
well, among others, Your Honor, it's the residual powers that we are now invoking.
So
Your
it's
Honor.
not too much, the power to reserve lands for public purposes.
That is the source of a precedent, not necessarily a sitting precedent.
A previous president reserved it for a public
Yes,
purpose.
yes, Your Honor.
Then a legislature created the purpose and said it's for only for to keep that place a hallowed and sacred ground. And a new president cannot change the legislative purpose. Is that correct?
Well, Your Honor, if you're referring to PD 105, our submission is it does not apply to the Libingan, Your Honor.
Because it's a shrine. You have called it
PD
a
105,
shrine.
Your Honor, as previously discussed, talks about erected national shrines, Your Honor, which they are the sites of birth, exile, imprisonment, detention, or death of a great and eminent leaders of this nation. So these are already settled, Your Honor. In fact, there is an enumeration in the second whereas clause of PD 105.
So you are now saying that he was a great and eminent leader, President Marcos.
No, this 105 does not apply at the Libingan, Your Honor.
It only applies to what?
It only applies to the national shrines declared in PD 105.
So the
And among
proposal,
others, these are the birthplace of Jose Rizal in Calamba, Laguna, Dalisay, Dapitan City, where he was exiled for 4 years, Fort Santiago, Manila, where he was imprisoned prior to his execution, Talaga, Tanawan, Batangas, where Apolinario Mabini was born, Pandacan, Manila, where Mabini's house in which he died, etc., Your Honor. In other words, the following criteria should be present. It must be the site of a birth, exile, imprisonment, detention, or death.
are not those just examples? In other words, the fact that the president is proposed to be buried at the libingan ng mga bayani, which is whether right now being developed still or already partially a national shrine, is it not in fact a violation not only of that PD, not only of that legislative purpose, but everything that has to relate to how he conducted himself as the architect of martial law?
With all due respect, I do not agree with Your Honor.
The faithful execution clause of the president, is it not a positive duty on his part to comply not only with just one specific AFP regulation, which is even of doubtful validity, but is it not his higher duty to comply with the Constitution, the laws, and all pronouncements of this court?
No, Your Honor. In ordering the interment of former President Marcos, President Duterte had no constitutional duty to faithfully execute the provisions of RA 289 because RA 289 is not the governing
No,
law.
I'm not talking about the Pantheon law. I'm not talking about the Pantheon law, so you can set aside the Pantheon law. Please just talk about the totality, because we are always looking at the Constitution and our legal regime in a total concept. We are not confined only to an AFP regulation. We talk about the Constitution, the history of the Constitution, the social and policy context that gave birth to it, and then the laws that were born out of it, and the judicial pronouncements. Is he not required by the faithful execution clause of the laws clause to ensure conformity and consistency with not only the letter but also the spirit of the entirety of our body of laws?
Your
Is
Honor,
it not his duty to be the first to uphold laws in this country?
as far as I know, there is no law prohibiting the burial of former President Marcos at the Libingan, Your Honor.
So you are saying that
did
his
not
only
violate any law.
restriction must be a clear negative restriction. That's the only thing that can limit his power. Are you aware of so many decisions that will disagree with you, that it is not only the absence of a clear negative prohibition, but also a contradiction between an action of an official with the rest of the body of laws and constitutions that we are construing here?
Well, I will stick to my guns, Your Honor. I believe there is no law prohibiting the burial of President Marcos at the libingan. The standard we use is military qualifications to be interred at the libingan ng mga bayani, Your Honor.
All right. Do you also know that under the deliberations of this present RA, the various legislators talked about the centrality of the human rights victim in designing a system of recognition of these victims. And if these victims are going to say to you, and I think that they have said that now, that recognizing him as worthy of being buried in libingan ng mga bayani disavows all that the state has been trying to do for them and reopens all wounds, how can you not now just confine the issue and the analysis to just the AFP regulation?
Your Honor, I respect your view, but I stick to my guns, Your Honor.
Yeah, but Mr. Solicitor, I know that this is new to you, but this is basically how oral arguments are conducted.
Yes, Your Honor.
In other words, one AFP regulation, which to you does not disqualify him, versus everything that we have already expressed here, both in the domestic law front and in the international law front. All of these are trumped by the AFP regulation.
My position, Your Honor, is there is no law that prohibits the burial of Marcos at the libingan, and President Duterte has not violated any law, Your Honor.
Do we make decisions on the basis of opinion polls?
That is a good indication of where the sovereign people
Mr. Solicitor,
believe at a certain time, Your Honor.
we have only used polls for only one purpose. We have used polls to declare what is the will of the people in electoral cases.
Yes, Your Honor.
Because our decree as a court is always to abide only by law and not by popularity. And we have disavowed, and that is in fact how we teach judicial ethics, and that is how we train the judges. The decision may be unpopular. The decision will always have people who will disagree with them, but always our North Star will be the Constitution. The Constitution, then statutes, judicial pronouncements on the same near parity level.
Again, I respect your opinion, Your Honor, but insofar as we are concerned, President Duterte has not violated any law or any provision of the Constitution.
So there has
We
to be
will put that in our memorandum, Your
so
Honor.
there has to be a clear prohibition before there can be a limitation on presidential powers. Do you understand how dangerous that statement is?
I am only referring to the burial of Marcos in the libingan, Your Honor. I'm not discussing the entire panoply of the Constitution, Your Honor.
Okay. So, is there any further question? I think Justice De Castro wants to ask questions. Justice De Castro?
The Solicitor General, you mentioned that there is no law prohibiting the burial of former President Marcos in the libingan.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, the petitioners, in pursuing their position, mentioned that there are statutes, principles of international law, and decisions of this court, but none of these expressly state or a prohibition of the burial of the former president in the libingan.
None, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, there is this AFP regulation which allows the burial of an awardee of a Medal of Valor and a former president, and a statesman, which means senator, congressman,
Yes, Your Honor.
positions which the former president also held
Yes, Your
during
Honor.
his lifetime.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, and for sure, there are also provisions of the Constitution that the President Duterte can invoke
Yes, Your Honor.
to support his position that his decision is meant to promote peace,
Yes.
national reconciliation.
Yes, Your Honor.
And we can just look at the preamble of the Constitution where we invoke the aid of the divine providence
Yes, Your Honor.
to ordain a constitution that will, among others, promote the principle of peace and other salutary principles.
Yes,
So
Your Honor.
there are two competing interests. The interests advanced by the petitioners here and the interests perceived by the President to
Yes, Your Honor.
outweigh or to make him decide which course to take to prevent the burial in the libingan or not. And he decided that it is in the best interest of our nation to allow the burial at the libingan.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is this a legal question?
This is a political question, Your Honor.
Will the President be answerable to this court in making a decision one way or the other?
Well, he will comply with the decision of the Supreme Court.
Yes, but
My job here
no,
is
it's not, that's
advocacy,
not
Your
what
Honor.
I'm driving at. My point is it for us, the court, to tell him which course to take? In the absence of a clear provision of the law prohibiting the burial, and in the face of these two competing interess, in the
Yes.
absence of that prohibition, how will the President decide? Is this a political decision or a legal decision?
This is a political decision, Your Honor, beyond judicial review. Because there is no grave abuse of discretion here, Your Honor.
And when he decides one way or the other, it does not mean that he is ignoring one interest.
Definitely not, Your Honor.
So he was just balancing which is best to promote the national, how to
Yes.
best promote the national interests.
Yes, Your Honor, and that prerogative belongs to the President and not to the petitioners, Your Honor.
And so it does not mean that he is ignoring the victims of human rights.
Correct, Your Honor. In fact, he's a compassionate person, Your Honor. But he has to do his job. As President, he has to exercise his political discretion and wisdom on this matter, Your Honor.
And for his decision, he will be answerable to the sovereign people
Yes, Your Honor.
who elected him,
Yes, Your Honor.
whether he made a right or wrong decision.
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you also, Your Honor.
Yes, Justice Leonen.
Just so we are clear, we are all of us, I think, are all in favor of finding a way to get into just peace, a peace which is not just about silence, but a peace that is recovered as a result of doing justice. And I think a policy of reconciliation is one way to get to justice. I think you know, for instance, my personal history. I was a negotiator for the MILF, and I would like to say that General Aguilar there was the head of my ceasefire committee at that time. And if I could pin on him the Medal of Valor right now, I would. But he is not yet qualified for the libingan ng mga bayani because he is still there. But that nonetheless, Mr. Solicitor General, I just wanted to say that. I heard you say national healing. Am I correct?
National healing, Your
Yes.
Honor. Yes, Your
Healing,
Honor.
nationally, yes.
Healing, reconciliation, peace, unity,
Yes.
all the works, Your Honor.
But healing is important. And I would like you to take a look at the people, the sovereign people, on this side of the session hall. And I think you know them. You think they will be healed by the burial of Marcos in the libingan ng mga bayani?
I believe that hope springs eternal, Your Honor. And we must also look at the other side.
So
As you said, Your Honor, you're an
they have
Ilocano.
filed a petition, and they are saying that there is not yet enough things that have been done in order to acknowledge what had happened during martial law. I'm just saying
Yes, Your Honor.
that perhaps as a political question and also as a matter of legal right covered by the Constitution, full respect for human rights, and Republic Act 10368, I think there must have been an effort by the President, I'm not sure because I asked you that question a while ago, to actually reach out to the victims of martial law. After all, he did say before he left for Laos, if I heard him correctly, I answer to no one except to the Filipino people.
Correct, Your Honor.
And in my view, at least this half of the session hall are Filipino people.
Yes, Your Honor.
And
Some of them are my friends, Your Honor.
yes, in fact, I hope all of them could be your friends. And maybe we could take into consideration, it's not easy to recover from rape, from torture. I think Mr. Neri Colmenares said he was arrested when he was 18 and released after 4 years. So some of the best years of his life was taken from him. Some of them are still looking for their relatives. So I guess what is important is not only the money, although I think it's very important, but perhaps there can be a way in terms of this case to try to find, what the President is really after, which is reconciliation. But for now, I think the legal issues to me are very clear, and I hope that you will also consider those points.
Thank you, Your Honor. And
Are there any other questions? None. So we will end here. The parties are given 20 days from today to submit your respective memoranda simultaneously. The resource persons are also invited to submit their position papers, if any they want to submit. Any matter you want to raise? Yes, Congressman Lagman.
Your Honors, the status quo ante-order would be expiring on September 12. Meanwhile, the parties had been given 20 days to file the respective memorandum. In the intervening period, Your Honor, after the expiration of the status quo ante-order, there is a possibility that the burial will be implemented and these petitions may be rendered moot and academic. So this is a question which we would like to raise before the Honorable Court, if there will be an extension of the status quo ante-order or the issuance of a TRO.
Yes, we are aware of that, Counsel, and we will, after this, the NBank will meet to discuss that issue.
Thank you so much, Your Honor.
So there are no other questions.
Incidentally, Your Honor, I just checked with the Archives Division of the House of Representatives. The resolution authored by the late Congressman Escudero has not been acted upon by the plenary. When the Congress adjourned its 15th, when the 15th Congress adjourned, it was still pending and acted upon by the committee to which it was referred to, the Committee on Basic Education. So there is nothing about that resolution which would be binding upon the House of Representatives, the Congress, and other bodies, Your Honor.
Okay, noted, Counsel. Include that in your memorandum.
With there being no further comment or instruction from this court, the memorandum from all sides, you are required to submit them in 20 days, including from the resource persons, should they be willing or minded to do so. This session is hereby adjourned.